So it's time now for the diversity hire of the week. People say, why do you spend so much time on this when look, we've spent time obviously on voter fraud. Big tech is the most important issue, I think, as it relates to certainly our job and the travel of information. However, more important than president is if men and women cease to exist, if we as a society no longer say that there are mothers and fathers, daughters and sons, sisters, brothers, and that there's a different way to rear them, that there's a different way to treat them, that they serve different roles in the family, in helping their children, that they can serve complementary roles in the community, that we are inherently valuable and different, which is, as a Christian, what we believe, fearfully and wonderfully created. If we remove the idea of men and women, if we make them fundamentally interchangeable, I do believe that Western civilization will cease to exist. I really do. That is the foundation. It's the bedrock. You cannot have a free country. You cannot have a country with minimal to no government intrusion without having smaller centralized units. So this is why also it's important when people say, well, why is the government and the marriage running business? And I understand. I'd rather we have civil unions than the government, the church be out of marriage. But this is why. That before federal government, before state government, you had to have the family. You had to have a nuclear family, and that these people had to have some kind of self-governing principles. And that means complementarianism. That means a mom, a dad. And it doesn't mean that single parents... No, look. There's obviously, one parent is better than none, but we're talking about the ideal, the foundation upon which we build society. And I do think that matters more than anything else, and especially when we also we talk about speech laws, and if you can be silenced or jailed in places like Canada or the UK for using what is undoubtedly 100% scientifically the appropriate biological term, and was the appropriate term in the LGBT community until 4 years ago, free speech ceases to exist. So are you starting to get the picture as to why it matters to me so much? So now you have someone who's the assistant secretary to HHS who actually is coming for your children. What do I mean by this? This person is as radical can be, and is the first publicly announced sort of, I guess you would say, pseudo cabinet pick from Biden, because it was a rush to say, look, we have trans. They want you, and this will become policy, and it will become hate speech to speak out against it. Rachel Levine, doctor, advocates putting your children and allowing them to on puberty blockers.
Remember puberty? Wasn't that fun? Wasn't that a lot of fun? So what if you're going through the wrong puberty? What if you're a transgender young woman, meaning male to female, and now you're getting... your voice is dropping, you're getting bigger, you're getting hair everywhere, and you're growing those tentacles, And what if you're a transgender young man, and now you have breast development in periods? It can be terrifying. Yeah, so here's two examples. So 17-year-old young man that I saw in clinic, we treated him, he was given intramuscular testosterone, he is now in his 20s, and he's doing great. 16-year-old young transgender woman, given spironolactone and estrogen, and transitioned, and now is in graduate school in her early 20s and did absolutely fantastic.
And this is going to be taught to your children alongside, hey, remember we taught this when we were to kids? Hey, you're going to notice some changes. You're going to have hair where there wasn't hair before. And hey, your voice is going to change. You're going to start being attracted to women. Also, by the way, your dick may bleed, which might as well just be a vagina, and you may be a woman, and it's all the same, and it's not okay, and it's okay, and it's not okay, but that's okay. This is how unironically radical this person who is going to have a say in what you can and can't do with your own and your children's health as a legal parent. This is how unironically radical Dr. Levine is.
So if I said LGBT, I think that almost everyone in the audience would know what I mean.
I'm sure there'd be an argument.
If I said LGBTQIAAP, how many people know what I mean? P can mean pansexual, polysexual, pangender, polygender, and there are lots of other terms, two-spirit, and I could go on, basically spend the entire 45 minutes talking about different alphabet soup.
And that's the point. I could spend the entire 45 minutes, I could spend the entire year trying to lay down landmines as I walk backwards in regards to pronoun, and the rest of society just wouldn't get anything done. Oh, well, yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
I now understand the points to all of this tomfoolery, bullshit. I don't know the scientific nomenclature. I'm just doing my best. Dr. Zayas. So let's explain why puberty blockers are bad. Okay, let me explain with the scientific literature here, lest you think I'm committing hate speech. Because they say, oh, puberty blockers. They just say, if then the kid realizes that they're not trans, you can just go off the puberty blockers. If adolescents don't get on puberty blockers, don't go through any transition, most adolescents and children who claim that they're trans, 98% of them grow out of it. 98% of them grow out of it.
Wow.
Now, I know some of you are saying, well, why you're saying that like it's a good thing. Yep. Now, correct.
Very good thing.
Here's why. Let me explain to you why. It's a numbers game. Yeah. And I'm not even we don't even have a math Asian here. No. For those who do undergo puberty blockers, so 98%, if they don't undergo puberty blockers or hormone therapy, they grow out of it. Yeah. For those who do, 0%. 0% grow out of it. Now, I understand you're saying, well, that just means that clearly the person who is on mind altering, and I do mean mind altering when we know what we know about the endocrine system with hormones and neurotransmitters, how often they are one and the same. Okay, so in order to be who they truly are, the mind-altering hormones are needed. All right, but let's still use that argument and let's get to the real, to the physical, because people who are transgender are 19 times more likely to attempt suicide. Wow. We know that, and it's about like 40 to 43% attempted suicide rate. Jeez. Do you know what it is after they transition? About 40 to 43% suicide. It doesn't get any better. You go from a 98% chance that your children will not be in the 19 times suicide rate demographic to a 100%, if you put them on puberty blockers, chance that they end up in that 19 times suicide demographic. Now, I know what you'll say. I know what people will say, the suicide thing. Well, the suicide thing is only because of how society has treated them. Well, not according to that article that we talked about with the 50-year-old playing college female basketball. Yeah. Because Z said, when I came out to my teammates, they were shocked. So it would change after transition, right? We're not just talking about barely passables. It would change. It doesn't change. Yeah. They advocate for this before the age of consent. Yeah. You can't consent to sex, but you can make decisions that permanently alter and or damage your sexual function for the rest of your life. Yeah.
Well, and look, somebody who's been suicidal like myself, and even more so as this conversation goes on, I have to honestly say, depression is depression. Right. You can't just put a label on it and go, it's the way society treated you. Depression and sadness are two very different things. Right. Depression is a mental illness. It's one that I have. Yeah. It's something that will make you kill it has nothing to do with it. That's not even a fair it's not fair to say that that's how they were treated, because everybody feels flawed and inferior in a certain way. And you are boosting it up by doing that.
And I've talked about this before, too, as someone who struggles with depression, which maybe we shouldn't have you and I in the studio together. That's not a problem. And there are a lot of cords around.
I made Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's also important to note, American slaves didn't have an attempted suicide rate of that level. Wow. Jews in the Holocaust didn't have a higher attempted suicide rate. Let's be clear about that. The only group that does, paranoid schizophrenics. Now, you can't say it. You can't say that it's similar for someone who believes something that is in direct opposition, that's antithetical to their biology. And by the way, you know what happens? I know this is something, these are the same people who drink from BPA-free plastic, which now isn't enough, so they have to drink from glass, right? And anytime you're at the gym, they have a glass bottle, and you're going there to just get, and they're like, no, don't touch my bottle. Don't bring it to the gym, asshat, okay? Don't bring glass, all right? You're not going to grow tits because you're drinking from an Ozark bottle. It'll be okay. But here's the issue. We want to avoid BPAs, to avoid these xenoestrogens, right, in the atmosphere. And people talk about chemicals. They say, we know that it's cancerous. When injected directly into a 9-year-old boy's ass, however, well, the science isn't in yet. We know what excess estrogen does to the male body. It's not good. It's actually not as harmful as more testosterone for women, but that's not good either, because excess estrogen is bad for women. It is fatal, cancerous for men. We know it. Let's not act like the science isn't in. Just say, look, this is our agenda, and we don't care if we put them into a very shallow, suicidal, or cancer-ridden grave, and then see if people believe it's empathetic. I hate that we are now turning a generation of kids into basically a study group.
Right. We have a generation of parents who have basically said, I have no responsibility to help my kids go through a difficult phase. Right. You're feeling that way? Okay, fine, you're trans. You're feeling that way? Okay, you're gay, you're lesbian, you're whatever, right? You were just born this way. That's okay. We'll just deal with it. Instead of saying, hey, I love you, let's work through this. Yeah. The most caring thing to do, it would seem, is to say, hey, Let's make sure there's a 98% chance that things work out. And guess what? If it doesn't work out by then, fine. If you're a liberal parent and you want to still let them do something when they're of the age of consent, say it's 16. Fine. You can drive a car. You can chop off your penis.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
But I would support my kid over absolutely anything. But just because he's 6, if he comes to me and goes,
yeah,
hey, I'm Superman, I'm not going to throw him off a roof.
Yeah. Well, let's see if that's true.
Let's just start by wearing some kryptonite quart's earrings.
See how
no, doesn't check out.
How do you feel in the cape and your mother's heels?
Hey, by the way, I have those numbers you were asking for. A Gallup poll from.
By the way, here is Dr. Levine's thoughts on psychological evaluations for children transitioning. Not needed.
It still does recommend a psychological evaluation. That's kind of controversial if you want other types of hormone treatment. If you want need hormone treatment for menopause, you don't need to have a psychological evaluation. What? If you are a man in their 40s, 50s, or 60s and you need testosterone or Viagra, they don't recommend a psychological evaluation. Maybe they should, but they don't. And if you want a nose job, you don't need a psychological evaluation. But if you want gender confirmation surgery, you
you think it's more unreasonable for a man who has been sexually active his whole life, and let's say is in his 70s and still wants to be intimate with his wife, but because of age, even though he's sexually aroused, the hydraulics don't work, to take clinically trialed medication to assist him in his intimacy with his wife? You believe that should require a psychiatric evaluation, but not somebody who wants to cut their penis in half like the Five Guys hot dog. I said I would fit it in there and invert it and take estrogen, which of course would create brittle bones and likelihood of cancer for the rest of their life. Am I hearing that right? Yeah, I do think one requires a psychological evaluation. And I love how dismissive Levine is, by the way, of the DSM-5. Because keep in mind, DSM-4 had gender dysphoria as a mental illness. And then they changed it to the DSM-5. So it's still not enough of a moving goalpost. The DSM-5 now says it's not a mental illness. Gender dysphoria are the symptoms of someone born in the wrong body. But it's still not enough because they say, because sometimes there are similar traits with other body dysmorphias, we recommend a psychological evaluation. DSM-5, which really was bending over backwards to not be hate speech, is still hate speech. The resume of Dr. Levine, well, really all we have is worked in Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania as a doctor opposed a bill that implemented a 20-week limit on abortions. And ban dismemberment abortions. We have this here from PA.gov. As a physician, my duty to my patients is to provide the most appropriate medical care. This legislation undermines that trust, limits the ability of doctors to exercise their own judgment with regard to their patients. That's just my politics, the idea of abortion, right? 20 weeks. That's maybe a little nutty. So let's go to what Rachel Levine, Dr. Levine has done in Pennsylvania, how Rachel Levine has helped their citizens. Pennsylvania, by the way, had one of the worst COVID rollouts in the country, right, as far as vaccine rollouts, when you look at their plans. And Levine actually instituted a COVID nursing home policy, much like professional sexual assaulter-in-chief Andrew Cuomo, that forced nursing homes to readmit COVID-positive patients. So that's a bad thing to do, right, as far as what's been under Z's watch. But do you know what's really crappy? Is behind the scenes, Dr. Levine, removed Rachel's own mother from a nursing home before instituting this policy. So it's kind of like insider trading with dead Mimas.
Watch Louder with Crowder live, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.